I want to say the most important thing I can say right off the top, very first, and that is thank you. I am enormously grateful to all the people who have listened, to the people who have participated in Man Listening from the very beginning. I will never forget you, and I'm eternally grateful for you. Thanks so much.
I want this world to be the love that I have in my heart sometimes.
What is the sound of one man listening? This is Man Listening, a fresh podcast featuring the stories of strong women who bounce back. Man Listening, because every woman deserves to be heard.
Hi, I'm Stuart Watson, and welcome to Man Listening. When I first asked my buddy Helen Gardiner Parks to appear on the podcast, she said something to the effect of, "Why do you want to talk to me?" And I'm like, I get that a lot. I talk to women who do not realize the commanding power of their stories. And I'm like, what, are you kidding me? I think she said something like, "What have I done? What have I..." And I'm like, are you kidding me? Wait till you hear her story and then you be the judge yourself. Here's my friend Helen. Where were you born?
I was born in Eastleigh, England.
I don't know where Eastleigh
It
is.
is a little bit south of London.
So is it a suburb?
I guess you could call it a suburb. I don't know that I've actually ever been there after being born.
Were you a military brat, or
No.
was a parent British?
Both my mum and my dad are British, right?
Is this an affected accent?
Well,
I can't
it's
tell.
affected, yes. But I can do it very easily because I grew up with it.
And how long did you live in it?
I only lived there for 10 months. And then my dad worked for I've Been Moved. And we came over, IBM.
IBM, yes.
And so we landed in Vermont for a 4-month stint that has lasted now for 54 years.
For your mother, your number what of how many?
I was the first child, and there's a lot of fun stories around that. And one of the reasons that I'm not as intelligent as I could be is that when I was born, the umbilical cord was so tight around my neck, and she was in what they call a maternity hospital, and the midwives, the nurses, what have you, were just saying, "Push harder, push harder, push harder, you're not pushing hard enough." And my mother was like bursting capillaries. And so when I was born, finally, I was black. And my mother, in her delirium, said, "I didn't have a black baby." Because my father is white and she is white.
What you're saying is that you had
lots of oxygen.
Lots of oxygen.
Yeah. So imagine how.
And that can be
how much
super
trouble,
serious.
Yeah, how much trouble I would have been if I'd, been born.
And so, how many siblings do you have?
I had one sister. She was born in the U.S., so we'd already moved, and she was born and needed a blood transfusion right away because she had the Rh negative blood.
Oh my word!
She was Rh positive. My mother is negative, so their blood just did not get along. And there was a book that came out once. I remember. Was it like Sid Vicious? He was destined to become a drug addict because he had a blood transfusion when he was born. So I have no idea if there's any science to that. But my sister did become a drug addict. She died when she was 24 and I was 26. And it's been a fantastic journey since then.
How did she die?
She overdosed on a combination of heroin and cocaine, which was her favorite thing. There was a particularly strong batch of the stuff that came through Brooklyn. We were both living in Brooklyn, New York at the time. And she just liked to push the envelope. And people would say, "Oh, she committed suicide." And okay, addiction is a slow and very freaking painful method of suicide. But I had just been at her apartment, and she had, bought a big bag of rice. And people that are committing suicide on purpose anyway, don't typically buy big bags of rice before offing themselves. And she was really proud of her bedroom and had me climb up into her loft that she'd had built. And then, a few days later, I got a call in the middle of the night and she was dead.
So you guys are pretty close.
Yeah.
You lived close to one another, and obviously you stayed in touch.
Yep. Yeah. She was my little blister, my little sister.
And I bet you're very bright, and I bet she was very bright.
She was even brighter.
Where did she go to school? What kind of brilliance?
She was second in her class with high school, and she didn't even go to graduation. She was that kind of, your typical...
Didn't give a valedictorian.
Yeah. Too smart for her own good kind of thing. And she went to, I think, maybe 4 different colleges and didn't complete any of them, just got bored, didn't do so well with authority. So she was creative, lots of paintings and things like that. And we wrote letters back and forth constantly, which were really goofy, quirky, just really different.
Do you still have those?
Yeah, I do. I actually found one the other day, which was so sweet. It was just so sweet, Stuart. I mean, and I was doing some sorting, and I found this box of goodies of, some medals that I had from bicycle racing and some, other things that I'd saved over the years. And I found this little box that had 6 marbles in it. And there was a typed letter. Remember when we had typewriters? Yeah. So Claire, my sister, typed out this letter saying, each of these marbles represents a jewel. And as we all remember from high school physics, physical science, a joule is a unit of energy. So each of those marbles represented a job that she would do for me. And it was just so sweet. It was just so sweet. So I had saved it, and I'm going to show it to my kids. Because they never got to meet her, of course. My kids are 24, 21, and 18, and Claire died 25, 26, I don't know, years ago, something like that. So they've missed out on their Aunt Claire.
Yeah.
And I, sometimes think about how much fun they would have had with her, assuming she'd been sober, because she obviously wasn't when she died.
Do you have any of her paintings?
A little bit, yeah, a little. I don't have anything up.
What kind of paintings did she do?
There's one that I'm thinking of that's a portrait of a woman wearing a headscarf, and it's all kind of warped, so not pretty stuff. A lot of anger in that girl.
But she was able to express herself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And was she working at all at the time?
Well, it was interesting. She worked at the same coffee shop that I then got a job at. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing, and I got in touch with this recently in talking with somebody else, is that I'm a food addict. Okay. I might not look like one, but I'm a food addict. And I binged on healthy ass foods. And so I never got, ginormous, and people didn't take me seriously. But my sister heard my pain when I had moved to New York City years ago. And I was crying on the phone with her, and she had been active in Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous at the time. And so she hooked me up with Overeaters Anonymous. She actually called somebody and had them call me. And I went to my first meeting. And like I said, I didn't fit the bill, for an overeater.
Skinny.
Yeah. So people were like, what the hell are you doing here? And so it took a while for me to get comfortable and find meetings. But in New York, you can find meetings for people who are bulimic, for anorexic, so I found my people. So Claire really, she had a heart. So she's the one that first got me onto my path of recovery. So,
Well, define food addict. What did that look like with all this healthy food?
I would binge, and being in New York, and I don't know, how much time people have spent in New York, but I would, when I got into recovery, I would white knuckle it, from the subway get off work, I'd make it to the subway and know I'd be safe. And then, from the subway to my apartment, as the dog is sniffing your hand.
It's okay. It's okay.
Just got to make sure you're okay. So I would go from bodega to bodega, and I could buy a muffin here and then another muffin there, and they would never know because, I could go to a different one every day. So I was very conscious of looking good, making sure that people didn't realize what I was up to. And then, I'd be back in my apartment.
Did you purge?
And then I would overeat, and I would put on music, and I would just start dancing like crazy. And so I was really exercise bulimic because I never put my finger down my throat. But, when you exercise like that after eating, you throw up. Oh my gosh.
For purposes of understanding Helen.
Yes.
Not them, but you. What do I need to know about your mom and dad to understand you?
I did not feel seen. I did not feel heard. That's basically it. Yeah.
Now, how much of that is a cultural British stiff upper lip, generational kind of a thing?
I think that that's a great story that we've fed ourselves, about the British stiff upper lip, because that is obviously a stereotype. But, I still have cousins over there, and I don't think they're struggling with the same stuff. So yes, it's a stereotype, and yes, there's usually a basis for stereotypes. And for whatever reason, my parents were not equipped to see nor hear my sister and I.
What did that look like? Give me a for instance. Like, what would that look like?
Wow, that's a great question, Stuart.
Like if you're coming home from school, mommy,
right,
blank.
I got an A. Why isn't it an A+? What? For real? Yeah, for real. And kind of more recent one that's come up recently because of my kids' ages, and my youngest is getting ready to go off to college, and she was having a super hard time deciding between two schools. And I had the same situation. I was trying to decide between Wellsley and Bryn Mawr, and I was literally spinning around on the kitchen floor on my back, and it was a bright yellow kitchen floor.
Those are great choices to have, man.
Yeah, I know. Like, you can't go wrong, right? But in my mind, it was like, do or die. I've got to make the right choice. And finally, I just said, Mom, what would you do? And she chose for me. And I asked her recently, with my daughter going through the same thing, and I was so clear, no, I'm not going to tell you which one I would go to, because that's me, I asked my mother, so why did you choose Wellsley for me? And she said, because it's closer. I was like, what? Here I thought there was some wise input, and it was just that it was closer. Because I was in Vermont and Bryn Mawr was near Philly. And yeah.
But if you look at the high school yearbook or whatever, and say, oh yeah, Helen. She was the one that was what? What were you known for?
A cross between feminist and quirky. Okay, so here's the high school story. You have behind you right now, on your chair, on your actual chair, 2 high school graduation gowns.
Ah.
That I don't know how they're still here. Okay, but check this out. So Burlington, Vermont, 1984. I'm graduating. I fill out the form. It asks me whether I'm a male or female, and I write male. Because I didn't want no virginal white graduation gown, right? I may have been a virgin, but I wasn't all about this purity trope. Well, they saw through my little ploy there based on my name, I'm guessing, and they sent me the white one, right? I was not happy. But then my friend John, he decided not to go to graduation. So he gave me his blue graduation gown. So guess what I did?
You wore it.
I wore it underneath the white one so that the vice principal wouldn't kick me out of line. Then when we stood up, I went, exactly right.
You revealed your superhero.
I did. I even
so you were early to the gender.
Yes. I stopped shaving when I was 15 because I learned about hair being power, and I wasn't having any of that. Yeah. So my mother had Ms. Magazine at the house, and she also had Good Housekeeping, so I kind of read all of it and was well schooled. And then, I went off to Wellsley and got further empowered.
And when you say feminist, there is a lot of
noise around that word now.
What did that mean to you then?
To me then, it was all about equal rights. It was all about the Equal Rights Amendment and women getting paid, thank you very much, for the same amount of work, being valued and seen and heard. Look at that. There's the theme. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. I want to be valued.
And why did you decide to go to an all-women's school?
That was another input from my mother, who thought that it would do me good in terms of my confidence. Mm-hmm. So that is a place where, I can say, yeah, I think you were probably right, Mom. So thank you for that. It's really nice. I mean, it kind of goes with the theme of your podcast, because when you're in a classroom where there are no men, they're not jumping up and down and shouting out the answers without raising their hands. And they're not, talking out of turn. We have the floor, and we have a different level of respect and sense of taking turn. In fact, we were talking just last night at dinner about a study that was done, men and women in the classroom, or, people who identify as male, people who identify as female. The language gets so clunky now, and it's a great thing, but doesn't quite roll off the tongue. In the classroom, and somebody was keeping track of who was asking, who was talking, who was, raising hands and all that kind of thing, and then comparing it with the self-reports from the males and the females. And the females were across the board much more accurate at saying, the guys were talking out of turn, not raising their hands, and taking the lion's share of the attention. And the guys were like, oh, it was 50-50. And it was just not. So
it's perception versus let's go to the video tape.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's count words. Let's count time.
Right.
Let's look at an objective measurement of. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to it. Even for myself, there's an authority in a deeper voice for me that happens to come with somebody who identifies as male. So it's an interesting question. I mean, it's obviously multifaceted.
When you graduated, what did you do after graduation?
I went kind of nuts. I did not want to go to graduate school. And so I took some time, and I found this fantastic program that led me to travel all over Central America for 9 months. I got to study Spanish, and I got to build houses, and I got to pick coffee at a farm cooperative, and I got to teach, and I got to do all kinds of amazing things all over Central America. We even went to El Salvador during a little break in the war there. This was in the late 80s. And we went to Cuba, even though we weren't, supposed to. So it was amazing. And then when we came back to the States, we were living in a cabin in the middle of a Daughters of the American Revolution forest. Okay.
What state?
In Massachusetts. And we would drive to different towns like Springfield and different places and present. We'd taken lots of pictures. We did videos. Even though when we were traveling in Central America, we were carrying everything on our backs and taking the local buses and all that. I mean, we spent no money. And we stayed with people that we met in the park and had lots of adventures. And so we would go to veterans places and go to schools and talk about our experiences, because it's really to let people know they're just people. people like us, people who care about their kids, people who care about their parents, people who care about their infrastructure and, whether a pipeline is coming through and just all the things that connect us as people. So that was a neat experience. And after that, I started working for Greenpeace and knocking on doors, raising money, getting people to sign petitions. And that was how I ended up being arrested because of an action. So I have a checkered past. I spent time in jail.
Where were you arrested?
That was in Albany, New York.
So
Yeah.
How long with Greenpeace?
A couple of years. And then I switched gears. I was getting burnt out on it. I really was. I was stopping to seeing the kind of the politics and the fun. And it just became about, I've got to raise money. I've got to raise money. And it was not good for me anymore. And I was not good for it. So I switched over and became a family services counselor at a homeless shelter in the Bronx. And I was living in Brooklyn. And it was great because, I was perfectly safe. But the people I worked with and the homeless families that I was supporting, they were like, "You live in Brooklyn?" And then, of course, my roommates were like, "You work in the Bronx?" It was great. And here I am, just this little white girl from Vermont,
I bet that's very gratifying in a way that knocking on doors was not, because you got to see the people that you serve.
Yeah.
That's nice. You can make a palpable difference.
Yep. Yeah. No, I've had some, it was great. It was great.
And then what did you do after that?
After that, my sister died while I was there. And that really upended. Oh my gosh, it just destroyed me. And shortly before she died, actually, I had met the guy that I would go on to marry. And shortly before I met him.
How did you meet?
I gave a party to celebrate that I had applied for graduate school. I decided I am going into psychology. I'm going to go get my doctorate in psychology. And so I was actually going to go to Chicago. And he came to the party to celebrate that I had completed all my applications. And because I didn't drink.
Who invited him?
Oh, this is the good story, right? So I was involved with Al-Anon at the time and Overeaters Anonymous. And so I had finger painting at the party to break the ice. So one of my buddies from Al-Anon, he said, "Can I bring a friend?" And so we brought Lou. And so they walk up the stairs to the apartment. And as I was, kind of escorting them up there, I swear that I had this thought cross my mind. I think I'm going to marry this guy. And marriage was never on my radar. Kids were never on my radar. So that was like, okay, what?
His finger painting was that good?
Yeah. So
wow.
I got married. Yeah.
Wow. And so did y'all weren't even dating.
Well, we dated for 3 months.
But when you had that thought, you just met him.
I had never met him. Yeah. Yeah. I just met him.
Wow. And so did y'all immediately start dating?
Not right away, because he'd just gotten out of a relationship. But then it was really neat being in 12-step programs in New York City, because there were so many events that were like dry events. And so there was a big New Year's party, there was some other party. And so we, kind of see each other there. And so that was how we started, was then. Then I invited him to an opera, and he invited me to a ballet, and then we moved in together. And
wow. When your sister died, were you already conversant with Nar-Anon or Al-Anon, with codependency?
Mm-hmm.
You weren't?
No. To be fair, one of the first things I did, so I've always had this bent towards self-discovery and just curiosity and openness and pushing myself and wanting to just know more, more, be more, a seeker. Yeah.
I knew I liked you.
So like the first thing I did when I got to college was I went and found the counseling center. I was like, I'm going to get some counseling. This is so cool. I hadn't been familiar with Al-Anon and Nar-Anon and all of those things, but I had started exploring the psychology literature for absent fathers and all of these, terms. And so then when my sister turned up as an addict, I immediately I had a therapist backing up. I found a therapist in New York through Al-Anon, some friends in Al-Anon. And she said, I suggest you check out Al-Anon. And so I did. And I was like, ooh, this is really cool.
For you.
And I have friends, who could really benefit from Al-Anon and who would like to be in Al-Anon. And yet, I know they would go in feeling like an imposter because they don't have anybody in their life who they know is drinking.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a target patient or whatever, identified patient, if you will. So I got into Al-Anon because of the dysfunction in my family growing up. And then when it turned out that my sister was addicted to cocaine, I was like, oh, I guess I can really stay now and, get to work. So I did.
And how did it help you with your sister in dealing with her?
It was tough, Stuart, because we actually were sharing an apartment for a while. And I remember trying to do the kind of detachment with love with her. She called me, and she had been strung out all night, and she was supposed to be at the coffee shop that we both worked at really early in the morning. And I guess she hadn't come home. So she was calling me to say, could you take my shift? And I said, no. I said, no, damn it. I might be your big sister, but I'm in Al-Anon and I am strong and I know my boundaries and I don't want to go into work right now. And then she called me back.
And
she
okay.
was crying and I was like, okay.
Yeah. Well, and there's not a right and a wrong answer either.
No, you're right.
But the thing that people have, particularly with the opioid epidemic now, and this was prior to the quote unquote opioid epidemic.
Yeah, it wasn't really cool yet.
Because what bugs me is that we keep going through these phases. So we'll have the cocaine phase, and then the crack phase, and then the meth phase, and then the heroin, and it's like each one of them is treated as a discrete entity depending upon the substance.
Right.
Whereas I see them all of a piece.
Well, and we treat it as some kind of war. What? I mean, and that we can go back to our conversation about how the typical female mind would approach that compared to the typical male mind, seeing things as wars that have to be defeated, that have to be won. And we can even take that further back to our hunter-gatherer roots, if you want, and say, we're going to go out and kill that effing problem, man. We're going to, put so many laws on these drugs and make it so illegal, and we're going to slam you into jail right away. And that's going to take care. No, that's not going to take care of the problem, because we get to go back to the other side of that, the gathering. Well, we're going to gather information. We're going to gather, what's going on with you? What's that about? What do you need? What can we do to support you? Instead of this all out, just guns blazing approach.
I don't want to keep you from dinner, but when I asked you if you would be on my podcast, do you remember what you said?
I do.
What did you say?
My unworthy monster was talking.
What did you say?
I said, what? Me? Why the hell would you want to talk to me?
I think you said, I haven't done anything.
I haven't done anything. Yes.
Are you freaking kidding me? You have a degree from Wellsley. You have a master's degree.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You've done all these jobs.
All kinds of things. Yep. A Leche League leader and all the other stuff that I've talked about. I'm a certified nutritional therapist.
You raised
I have three children that I homeschooled.
Oh my God, are you kidding? You survived the loss of your sister.
Yes.
And you processed that to where you can still.
And I got to close with this, because this has come out of the transformational programming that I've done, that my sister gets to live on in a retreat center that I am creating with my husband as an outflow of my current work with the optimal health in your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. And that center is going to be in the mountains. It's going to be gorgeous, and it will be called the Claire Celine Center, because she hated her middle name. So that's just a little funny thing to jab at her.
Her last name was?
No, Celine was her middle name, and she couldn't stand it.
Oh, so
So
you're
it's got to be
gigging her.
yes, it's got to be
She's
called
gonna
the
come back
Claire
and haunt
Celine
you.
Center. Yes.
Claire Celine. Well, that's lovely. I don't
Isn't
know
that
why.
awesome?
Yeah. So is she a gardener?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
Claire Celine Gardiner. Yeah.
So but it'll only be the two names. Claire Celine.
Yes, Claire Celine Center. Just the flow of that is lovely.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I honor you.
And I you.
And I acknowledge all you've done as a courageous woman.
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, it was.
We'll do it again.
All right.
All right. Nowadays, I see Helen out on the greenway. Whenever I'm out there, it seems like we always bump into each other. And she always waves and I wave because I'm always listening to audio podcast or raw audio or something, and she's always on the phone. It seems like a business call, a coaching call, something. So I'm so rich, so blessed to know people like her. Thank you, Helen.
Man Listening is a production of Unmediated LLC in cooperation with the Queen City Podcast Network and Balto Creative Media. Allison Andrews at Andrews Creative and Rachel Clapp-Miller are developmental producers. Sally Higgins at Higgins & Owens tries to keep us legal. Our music is A Day at the Park by the group Pictures of the Floating World. Your announcer is Catherine Smith. That's me. Please go to our Patreon page. You'll find us at patreon.com. Look for Man Listening, one word, no spaces. We hope you'll join us by becoming a member. A small investment can raise up the conversation. If you want exclusive member merch like a t-shirt, we can arrange that too.
A huge shout out and thank you to all the people who've bought the book, What She Said and What I Heard, who've supported the podcast through Patreon, and who've listened and held me up from the very beginning. Thanks so much.
Don't forget to support us at Patreon. We believe one voice can change the conversation. Click the subscribe button, and next week you'll hear.
When things don't work out for me, I believe it's either it's not my season or it's not the right strategy. Not, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough.
That's next week on Man Listening. Thanks.